We have minutes of the June 18 Supervisors meeting, and I move that we approve them as presented.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Seeing or hearing none, I move the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Announcements.
Mike, can you use the mic?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Public safety information. Bob, please.
Yeah. This is July safety report. Accidents through May of 2012. During May, there were 16 accidents, the same numbers last year. 7 were at various intersections. There was no obvious pattern to the accidents. The total for the year is now 77, down from 89 for the same period last year, a 14% decrease. The police activity in May, there were 83 calls from the Chester County Radio, 4 criminal investigations, 79 routine, 6 false alarms, 5 auto accidents, 17 traffic citations issued, and 17 traffic arrests. There were a couple of highlight events. There was a serious accident at McFarland Roadkill just prior to the installation of our 4-way stop sign. And on Memorial Day, the chief had to corral 2 horses that were wandering our streets. I have an action item for the board. The safety committee has recommended that we acquire a second speed sign board. I move we approve that request. Second. Discussion?
I haven't heard of this request before. That's very true. I don't even see the minutes of it. I see no problem with it. I don't know that our safety board has been used heavily.
Oh,
Yes, it is.
it's a constantly.
Okay, if that's the case, then I certainly approve.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm finished.
Where is that located? It's the safety board. It's the speed board that we have that we move periodically from place to place in the township.
Has a radar gun on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Keeps the speed of
Yeah.
the vehicles.
That's exactly right.
That was purchased under a grant arranged for by Chris Roth,
Okay.
the original one.
Yes. Okay. Lisa, if you would, please. You,
I'm going to use it to tell people I'm back there. I want you to hear what I'm saying.
Thank you.
First, in August, I'm going to present the second quarter financials. I just wanted to let everybody know. And they'll be on the website the weeks prior. This is the part I thought you'd be interested in, Bill. Chief McCarthy and I met with our zoning officer and our building inspector to discuss all the property violations in the township. We've created a list of all the ones that we're aware of right now. And we've instructed our zoning officer and our building inspector to periodically drive around the township and see if they can find any other properties of violations. We've also created a property violation policy so that there's a clear policy on how to handle the violations. And we had a form printed. It's a 4-part form so that we can keep track of all the violations. So far, they've started getting a few of them cleaned up, and we're working diligently on them.
Lisa,
Yes.
Following up on that, a couple months ago, I think the Scudder asked for a report.
Yes, he has that.
Do we have a report?
He has that.
Okay, then maybe he'll comment on it. Go ahead.
Not tonight. No, the only comment I have is that having spoken with the chief after the last meeting to follow up on it again,
Right.
I was pleased to know that the process had begun, and I'm very pleased to hear that it is now in fact happening. It's not just that we're talking about it. My only question is on the policy, because I don't think I've seen the policy. Does it deal with habitability questions as well? If somebody has tenants and the water doesn't work or the heater doesn't work, is there, other than state law, is there a township issue involved?
Yes, I did. All 3 of you got the policy a while ago. So
Okay.
it's in there. It's been months ago, but the township adopted the property maintenance code, which now permits the township to enforce those issues.
Good. Thank you.
The second thing I wanted to bring up, at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the FDIC coverage of township monies. And I didn't, I wanted to bring a letter with me that we get annually from the bank, so you can all understand how the bank collateralizes our money. The bank, this is what they send us every year. It says that they pledge collateral for deposits of public funds on a pooled basis. Kennett Township is under this collateral pool consisting of acceptable securities as outlined under Act Number 72, 1971, session of the Pennsylvania Legislature. The Federal Home Loan Bank is custodian for the collateral pool. And then it gives the total public funds that are in the pool, which is $574 million, and then it deducts the FDIC coverage, and it gives the net funds requiring pooled securities and gives the value of the pooled securities. So I wanted you all to know that we do have this letter from the bank that we get annually. I saw the letter that the Oversight Committee sent to the supervisors, and so I thought, since they haven't responded to you, I'd respond to you. The first item, or the first thing I wanted to address was the open space easement with Schmidt. Schmidt is following through and having a trail on his property. There's still a lot of things to work out with that trail. I've scheduled a meeting for the supervisors and the property owner and North America Land Trust this Thursday, so they are going to try to get all these issues worked out. One of the major things is that the township does not want to own a trail, and nor should we own a trail. The Land Conservancy has agreed that they would be willing to own the trail easement with some conditions, so supervisors have that information and they have to work on all of that.
Which land conservancy?
The Southern Chester County Land Conservancy.
Just who you're talking with?
Yes.
And then North American Land Trust.
They will not own, they will not hold the trail easement.
And this will occur at a meeting or a resolution.
I hope so.
Has any money been transferred to Mr. Schmidt?
No.
This will require another vote by the Board of Supervisors.
No.
As far as, no, the trail easement, they just, the three of them have to work out. I don't know that that would require another vote.
Question. It's a question.
I don't think so. Because they've already agreed that they would do the trail. There was discussion in your letter about the open space procedure for open space funding. A week ago, I sent to the supervisors the Scudder's proposal for the open space funding and the Land Conservancy Advisory Council's responses to that, and I asked the supervisors where we stand on that, so they need to resolve that as well. The other part I wanted to talk about is the auditor recommendations.
Sorry, Liz. Who is responsible, or who's going to resolve?
I've asked the Board of Supervisors to get back to me as to what they want to do with this open space procedure and policy.
Right. So you're waiting for the response of the board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
In the auditor recommendations, I wanted to explain to you, state the things that the supervisors have already implemented and the things that are still outstanding. In the strength and controls part, Tim Umbright recommended the following things. Deposit details are printed with each sewer receipt. That's being done. The day Tim told us to do that, that was done. All invoices are stamped with initials, amount of charge, date, supplies, and workers received. That's done. The gas and diesel fuel is to be locked, and a daily record is maintained. That's being done. The bank statements are to be opened by supervisors. Bob Hammaker is the supervisor who's in every day, so I've been putting him in his bin every month. The township was to close and consolidate the checking accounts to have one main checking account. We did that. And this was all done back in March. And the township has separated the liquid fuel, sewer, open space, escrow, and library funds. And I wanted to note that the liquid fuels, open space, and library had already been separate bank accounts prior to this audit. So there's no outstanding recommendations on that. The general policies, the 1099s are being prepared. The interest rates have always been checked on a quarterly basis. There was a recommendation that the escrow money interest needs to be determined if it would stay with the township or go back to a developer. Unless I hear otherwise from the supervisors, the township has always kept that interest. The township did begin benchmarking with other townships on a list an email list to find out pay rates, employees' benefits, road maintenance, police coverage costs, insurance, fund balances, and services provided. The township has established separate escrow accounts within the accounting system for each development. And we did begin letting the consultants know when they cannot go out and do inspections. And the supervisors did agree to charge some of the administrative costs for sewer billing and the roadmaster's salary to the sewer fund. The only outstanding recommendation from general policies is that the supervisors need to determine what to do with the general fund balance. Bob Hammaker, who's in charge of employees, is working on the changes to the personnel policy, which will be then reviewed by the supervisors as a whole. And the outstanding issue there is the supervisors need to discuss the retirement plan and the cell phone policy. So those are the outstanding issues with them. The last item is that we've been receiving a lot of complaints about the traffic on Route 1 due to the construction and the repaving there. Today I received 6 phone calls about it. Several people said that we have enough money and they want me to ask the supervisors to pay somebody to sit there and direct traffic. They seriously asked that, and I said I would ask, but I didn't think that would happen. But unfortunately, it's something that we can't control because it's PennDOT. We're trying to work with PennDOT. I know Albert's been working with them, Roger's been working with them, and we're trying to get them to change the timing of the lights. But they're working out there. And do you have any input on that, Albert?
Well, what they're doing is they had to change it to 1 lane 2 days last week in both directions. Today it was 1 lane southbound. That really backs up the traffic because of the volume on Route 1, but I don't see what they can do about that. There is a problem that I see. I got calls from people on Elmwood Drive who live in Hamilton Village, and it's not that the light's not working properly. I think it needs change. I did talk to our contractor today, and what it needs is, what it does is the light on Elmwood stays red constantly until somebody trips, comes up and hits the trip. Then cycles to green for both 52 South and Elmwood, but you don't get enough time to get off. You don't make the middle of the highway before it allows the traffic from 52 South to go northbound, and that's now 2 lanes. So what has to happen, according to our signal contractor, and we have to get this all approved, is there needs to be a separate green cycle for Elmwood Drive, which means when somebody comes up and hits the trip, it stays red on 52 South, it stays red on Route 1 until all those cars clear. That's what needs to be done. We're working on getting that approved. It's going to change the signal permit, and that's as far as we went today. I apologize for the air conditioner. I turned it on here earlier today, but it tripped itself off on dirty fillers, even though they're brand new. I don't know what caused that, but I removed it just a short time ago so we get some air, and that's where we're at. I don't know what happened there. The other thing I wanted to mention is I've been here a number of years, and I never saw there was a problem with all these nuisance ordinance violations and housing violations. To answer your question, Mr. Stevens, we adopted the building maintenance code about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. That covers that issue. But I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden we had all these problems, and the answer is Chet McCabe. If anybody knows him, he was here for probably 35 years. Chet would see a violation because he lived here, or somebody calling, Chet would simply pick up the phone because he knew the property owner and said, get this fixed. There wasn't any documentation. We didn't know that's how the system basically was working. That's why we went into the procedure with the, I get a violation, if I get assigned a violation, or the building inspector or the zoning officer has so much time to reply back to you, and then you have a system to check to see if that complaint came in and that it was taken care of. I can't do all of them. We found there was more than we realized, but you hired a building inspector and he can. That's how the system now works. Plus, people can come in, and I want to emphasize this. You can complete the form. You can do it anonymously if you want. That's part of the procedure. And say, hey, such and such a property's got a problem. Can you fix it? It's anonymously, but we'd like to have your name to report back to you that, hey, we fixed it. So.
We have Kenny Whitman from Longwood Fire Company here.
I have one question before Kenny speaks. It has to do financial. The bond on the treasurer. The question was raised.
That's being increased this month to 11 million.
Yeah, as I understand it, you don't have to increase it to the total assets, but there are certain things that have to be done which are perhaps at risk at some point in time. So it doesn't have to be 11 million or 12, wherever we are right now. But it's being, what are you going to raise it to?
Well, we were going to raise it to 11.
They really, okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, there was one other item on the letters.
Excuse me, could you identify yourself?
I'm sorry, I'm Mike Gutman, Kennett Township. There was one
Oh,
other.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Yes.
I didn't address that because they should address that. I can't answer the work session question.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, I meant
Yeah.
to say that when I was done. I don't know if you guys wanted to answer any.
We haven't talked among ourselves. We have talked the subject, establishing another afternoon work session. I think that's your question.
Yes.
We've talked about that previously. We did away with the work session, as you know, over a year ago for the reasons that we stated at the time. I haven't felt any overwhelming public interest, other than a few people, of us doing that again. It didn't seem to serve the purpose that it was intended. That's why we shut it down. But I'll tell you what we can do. We can revisit the issue, the three of us, and we will do that.
If I may make a comment, we ran an online survey. It's been running about 3 days, over the weekend basically. And we got 25 responses. Of those 25 responses, 96% said yes, they would like to continue work sessions. Of those, it was roughly evenly divided. 14 said that there should be 2 work sessions a month, and 11, or 44%, said there should be 1. In addition, 23, or 92%, as you can imagine, said that it should be in the early evening. And it said, and the survey said, e.g. 7:30 p.m., so similar to this meeting. And then there was an additional question which asked, would you prefer a second BOS meeting in the early evening every month instead of a work session? And this was mixed. 28% said a second BOS meeting would be preferable. 40% said stick with the monthly work session, or possibly 2. And the other 32% said they weren't sure, basically.
Would you do us a favor, please, and send us the results of the questions and the survey?
Sure.
And I'll remind you that one of the main reasons why we did away with the Wednesday afternoon, every other week work session is that they were poorly attended.
Right, and as I recall from earlier meetings, and as the survey would tend to suggest, the problem may be that they were held in the early afternoon and not in the evening, when people felt it was them.
Okay.
No.
Lisa, excuse me for interrupting you, but on the point that was just questioned, I'd like to put it as an agenda item for next month's meeting, that we address and make a decision on this. I think that it seems like sometimes we do better if we have deadlines, and I'd like to see one.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have Tammy Whitman from Longwood Fire Company here, and she's going to talk to you about the ambulance subscription service.
Fresh samples for you.
Thank you.
This is the mailing that will be going out to the citizens of the township. Thank you for having me. I'm the EMS coordinator for Longwood Fire
Use
Company.
my microphone,
Oh,
please.
okay. Great. My name is Tammy Whiteman. I'm the EMS coordinator for Longwood Fire Company. Over the last year, when I took over, we had some interest in an ambulance subscription drive program. They're very big in the United States and more so in the western part of Pennsylvania. And what it is, with the ever-changing environment with insurance, with Medicare, now with our health care reform, you, the citizens, are getting more and more of a bill when you use a 911 service. It used to be you'd never see a bill, your insurance company would take care of it, Medicare would take care of it. Now that's not happening. They're pushing that off to you. So Longwood Fire Company wants to offer its citizens the option of joining a subscription drive. And $50 for a single and $100 for a family. You will never receive a bill from Longwood Fire Company if you're taking 911. Now, you are responsible for your copay and deductibles, but you're never going to see a bill for the mileage Medicare didn't pay, or what your insurance company didn't pay, or they didn't pay for a monitor or drive, or the decision to have that paramedic aboard. We actually take that in. And part of our decision to do that is hoping that this drive is going to not only help us with our current write-off amount, which last year was $189,000, which is funds we never saw, but it's going to help us cover some more additional write-offs that we're seeing. And any money that wouldn't be used to cover those write-offs will be used for the educational and equipment needs of just our service. And so we're really hoping that our citizens, this is something that a lot of us have come to want, and that we sort of get behind. The nice thing about it, too, is that if you do not use us, which we hope you don't, in that year, it's a tax donation to the fire company. So it's a win-win for you, really. So I'm here just to let you know you're going to be receiving flyers. We started our mailings last week. You can always call the fire company. You talk to myself or our administrator, Monica Spragle, and we can sort of work through the process. There's also information on our website. You're going to see us more and more out in the community, sort of telling you about this. One of the other things I want to let you know about is a change in Medicare law dealing with 911 called an ABN, and it's called a notification of non-coverage. So if we take you, if you call because you fell and you don't have any other means in the ambulance, it's just an example, Medicare might not pay for that call, and I have to provide you a form that says that. If you want to go to Christiana instead of the closest facility, which Medicare will only pay for, you're going to be responsible for your mileage. Now, if you're a member of the ambulance club, you'll never see that bill because we're going to take care of that for you. And that's why the subscription price is really going to help us absorb some of that cost that in these ever-evolving, we're getting daily, if not hourly, updates from Medicare and what is changing out there for you. And one of the big drives to get this out there was the ABN, because you're going to be seeing a lot more bills, especially on the Medicare end, and your traditional insurance.
I have a question, Debbie, thank you. I received this in the mail late last week, and I was a little disturbed that so much information was being asked of me, and it's not included in what you've given me tonight.
It is question. I actually have some. He's just talking about, when you sign up, we ask for a copy of your insurance card, demographics of your family, and that's so that all I do with that's all covered under HIPAA, is I pass that on to my billing agent. So that when he receives that trip report, he knows you're a member of our ambulance club. He can make sure that he has the most current information on you, and that's why we ask of all.
I have another question. You talked about call to 911.
Mm-hmm.
If I come across an accident and call 911, who gets billed for that call?
The patient, not you. You're just the observer. So, and when 911, if he's talking about, you drive past 52 and you see an accident, or a car pulled over and you're concerned, the dispatcher always asks for your information, your telephone number, your full name, and that just comes up on our CAD sheet. You certainly don't get a bill for that. Only the patient gets a bill for that if there is one. So, are there any other questions?
How are you coordinating with Kennett Fire Company?
We are not. We are only doing our service area at this time. You would be talking about if Kennett came and took you BLS and maybe there was a paramedic on board from Longwood Fire Company. There is part of a Kennett Township that is dually response, and that is Kennett and Longwood, and that is ALS comes from Longwood because Kennett does not have that service, and BLS comes from Kennett. You would still be responsible for your BLS portion, and we would take care of your ALS portion because they're billed separately.
On that same point, if,
ALS is Advanced Life Support Service.
on that same point, if it were necessary to be transported by helicopter to a hospital, that would not be covered either, would it?
Usually your insurance pays a great majority of those bills. I've never had a call from a patient that said, I have this $8,000 helicopter bill. That's more negotiation with that service. We certainly on our end, because we would be a lot of ground support and care, would help with that portion of the bill. It's only our portion of the bill that we can assist you with. I hope in the next couple of years as the service grows, I can get Kennett on board where we have joint partnerships. But because this is the first year of this, we're just sort of making feelers, and we want to see how the community takes this on, if this is something they really want and we can do more with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy, it's very informative. Now, the township provides money to Longwood Fire Company. Does any of that money go into the EMS, or is that
A portion of what you do as a fire company does go to EMS. It's usually 10 to 15%. And what I'm looking at by doing this is really covering our majority of our write-off money. My billing agent.
By write-off, you mean your losses?
Our losses. He's projecting over $200,000 this year in losses, just because of the way that the reform is going in Medicare losses. And just the state of healthcare right now. We're seeing more and more people without insurance that we have to negotiate payment with. And just so you know, traditional insurance, we bill anywhere from $600 to $850 basic life support, and anywhere from $950 to $1,300 for advanced life support, depending on the level of care that you're getting. I traditionally see maybe half of that. Like our paramedic just going out with the BLS, I might only make $50 on that call. Sometimes I don't make any money on those calls. So that's really where the subscription has. I have a $1.2 million budget this year, and the cost of doing business for us to provide that service to you is just ever increasing. Our costs are going up and our funds coming in are less. And the same thing's happening to you. Your costs are going up and you're not making, the average is not making any more. And more and more I'm getting the telephone call, how do I help? How do I pay this? I want to pay this bill. Can you work with me? And this is a way that that $100 guarantees you. You don't have to really worry about a big bill.
Am I being crude by asking what is the membership fee?
No, not at all. It's $50 for a single, and $100 per family. And that family is either a couple or 7. I just had a call from a gentleman today who said, okay, my son's in college and he lives with us. And I said, well, then you're just a family, because he's still under your health care policy. You know, because he wanted to do a separate one for his son, and I said, that's not necessary. And like I said, if you never use us, that's your write-off donation for the fire company.
I think that's random.
It's annual. Thank you very much for your support and time.
Is Matt Sabo back there? Matt Sabo has submitted a letter to the supervisors regarding the Limestone Ridge proposal. He wanted to speak for a few minutes on that.
Mind if I stand up? Thank you. As you know, I'm a member of the Planning Commission, have been for a while, but last month I recused myself from considering the Limestone Ridge application for a number of concerns that I submitted in a letter to you in June. And since that time, there have been a couple of letters back and forth. The applicant's attorney submitted one, and I got copied on it. And I just learned some things. And I have to say that when I recused myself, it was based mostly on being uneasy about the way things happened with the conditional use hearing. What I've learned since then is I've gotten more documentation to back up what my cause for concern was. And I wanted to go through that very briefly with you tonight, and specifically because I think it does impact the planning process that Limestone Ridge is currently in, and how that needs to proceed. And I wanted a chance for myself to talk to you publicly about some things I'd like you to consider and as the planning process goes forward. But my specific concerns with conditional use hearing was that there was a meeting that was called while the hearing was in session that not all the parties were aware of. And one of the things I learned since writing the initial letter is that the conditional use hearings are governed under provisions in Article 25 of the zoning ordinance. And I don't want to read all of that article or even the section that I sent to you, but yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. One provision specifically states that the Board of Supervisors who are deliberating in those hearings, and the hearing officer, which I believe was the township solicitor in this case, the hearing manager, who was managing the hearing, shall not communicate with any party without all other parties knowing. And they also will not visit the site without all other parties knowing. Went and looked back at the hearing decision that was published, and makes very clear that the hearing started August 15th. It adjourned December 19th. And it also, in the decision, documents a meeting that was held on November 18th between the applicant and township consultants, at which time road improvements to McFarland Road were discussed. In Mr. Jarrow's letter, he was the applicant's attorney, wrote the letter dated June 12, 2012. There's a specific line in there saying, and this is talking about the meeting on the 18th of November of last year, that meeting was held after we met with the township solicitor and the township engineer, who in turn received direction from the township to conduct the meeting. Now, I was serving on the Planning Commission in regards to this matter at that time, and the Planning Commission was a party to the hearing. And I know there were a number of other parties, and I think some of the people in this room tonight were parties to that hearing. Is there anybody here who was party to that hearing? And can you leave your hands in the air if you were aware of the meeting that took place on November 18th? That's the point I was trying to make. And the result of what happened of that meeting was, sometime after that meeting, the township engineer changed their position on 3 conditions that they had recommended in July of last year regarding McFarland Road. And those recommendations were either eliminated or substantially changed. McFarland Road is, in my opinion, the most important planning aspect of this project. We all know about McFarland and Rosedale and the safety problem there. McFarland Road has some safety issues. Those of us who live on Newts Farm Lane know what it's like to get in and out of our lane onto McFarland Road. So we were very concerned about the improvements in McFarland Road, and when the recommended conditions of the township engineer were changed, and they seem to have occurred because of this meeting, which seems to have some conflict with how the ordinance says the hearing should be managed, that was very troubling to me. The hearing is over. We can't go back to that. But because of what occurred and because of where we are with the required improvements to McFarland Road, I thought it was very important to publicly request that the supervisors do something that you've always done, which is, and all the time I've lived here, we've been very scrupulous about requiring, and the Planning Commission's been very scrupulous about requiring that plans be in full compliance with all ordinances prior to being approved. And that is the first and foremost thing I'd like to ask you about this project. We've had a significant problem, in my opinion, with the conditional use hearing, and I think it's very important that we be scrupulous from this point on in making sure that there are no more shortcuts or anything else that leads to a problem in public perception or basic perception that things are not being done properly. The second thing I'd like to ask is that there were a number of points in the engineer's most recent letter, which was 27 pages long, reviewing the application. And I think they make the point that this is a very complex situation. It's a large project. It presents a number of complex issues, demonstrating the need to be very deliberative and thoughtful and careful in the planning process, making sure we're getting all the information we need to make a correct decision, whether it be from the applicant, from our legal advisors, from our engineers, or from outside consultants if necessary. I'll go through those very briefly. I don't want to go into a bunch of them. They're in my letter. You can see the details from that, or if you want to ask, you can ask questions. But first one is a request from the engineer about a decision on a regional traffic study, which I found puzzling because I knew a traffic study had been submitted for the conditional use hearing. But I talked to our engineer about it, and in their opinion, they have questions as to whether the traffic study that was submitted really meets the requirements of what we considered a regional traffic study as per the ordinance. When I read the ordinance, again, I'm not a lawyer, but when I read the ordinance, it certainly looks to me like this project merits, not just merits, requires a regional traffic study. That's the word that's in the ordinance. A regional traffic study shall be required if it meets certain criteria. So I think there's a lot of questions on that. First of all, obviously, traffic studies have already been supplied. Does that mean that the township cannot request further traffic studies? If they can't, is a waiver necessary, since this is a subdivision and land development hearing, or a subdivision and land development provision? Is it wise to grant a waiver if one is necessary? Would a regional traffic study possibly answer more questions, particularly since traffic control and improvements to McFarland Road were the specific items that were impacted by the decision that happened during the conditional use hearing? These are the things that I think need to be thought through, and all the information, whether it be legal, technical, or getting more information from the applicant, really has to be cleared up before a final decision on that can be made. There's a geotechnical study that was submitted with the project, and one of the residents along McFarland Road at the June Planning Commission meeting asked a very good question regarding whether blasting was going to be necessary at the site, because there's a lot of rock there. The applicant's engineer, who I have worked with before and I have no reason to doubt, stated categorically they had no intention to blast, but our engineer, in reviewing the geotechnical study, says there's not enough information to make that conclusion. This is critical because right across the street we have Mr. Gorman's property, and we know that there is 50-some gallons of fuel oil trapped in the bedrock on Mr. Gorman's property because of the accident that occurred there. What impact blasting would have on that, I don't know. I can't say. I don't know if anyone can say, but I think we have an opportunity in the planning process to plan for that contingency and require that the applicant plan for that contingency. There is a provision, again within subdivision and land development, talking about the need to report on the impact of a project on community facilities. such as schools, emergency services, road maintenance, things like that. And I wanted to bring that up specifically because of a conversation that happened at the Planning Commission work session, the public work session that happened last Tuesday. One of the Planning Commission members is Dr. Karkasek, who was the superintendent of Kennett schools for many years. And he specifically stated in the time that he was a superintendent, the student population in Kennett School District grew by almost 1,000 students. And in his experience, he never once got any warning from any municipality that more students were on the way. They just showed up. And it would be really helpful to make a report of this type so that people can plan and put into their plans, what are we going to have to do? Is it going to be necessary to redraw school lines? Is it going to be necessary to expand schools? I imagine emergency services, road crews, other folks would feel the same way. And towards that end, it's necessary to have the applicant provide the information that would be necessary to make those kinds of reports, have it reviewed for accuracy, and present it. And that was pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about. As I said, I think I've served on the Planning Commission for 9 years now, and in that time I've always been impressed by the fact that we have been scrupulous in really requiring plans to be in compliance with all ordinances before we approve them. This particular plan has a deadline. The applicant has made that clear, and that places pressure on them, and it's not right for us to delay response to them, but it is necessary for the township to provide protection for the residents by being very careful and thoughtful and realizing what a complex project this is because of its size and its location.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, may I also comment? I spoke to you before the meeting also on this, but I wanted to say publicly that I thought that your letter was both thoughtful and detailed. I commend you on that. It brought to mind the fact that I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the area who expressed a lot of concern about the procedures that had occurred. So I'm very sensitive at this point to the issues that you have fingered. And so I certainly, and I'm sure that my colleagues who will join me in this, will be very concerned about looking to these issues as that development continues to progress.
May I ask a follow-up question? Last year, I remember several times Mr. Falkoff talking to me about an ordinance that was in preparation specifically around apartments and the inspection of apartments or something of that nature. Was that ordinance ever passed? Was it ever worked on? Is there a status on it that you can recall?
I don't know what that ordinance is.
I'm drawing a blank, man.
Okay. I remember it being mentioned several times in planning commission meetings. I don't know.
Multiple dwelling.
Yeah, multiple dwelling.
Multiple dwelling is what it is.
So who was working on that? I've never seen that.
No. I don't remember, I might have presented it to Alan, but it was one of these things where we need to consider this because as the police for the township, I need to be able to enforce certain things in multiple dwellings, and this is going to be a large multiple dwelling. That's one, and if I can go for this project and make a suggestion, I'm not going to be very popular after tonight anyway, not that I talked to him, but one of the things that occurred here was the engineer, he's a nice man, but he conducted that meeting without all of the planning commission at his office. And I think maybe this plan should be reviewed by our other engineer who does the sewer stuff, who's capable of doing that, because he's right, some things changed. I mean, I want left-hand turn lanes, and he tells me we can't force them to do that, but other townships do it. How do they do that? And then we had this meeting, I think I informed Lisa, and in which you were informed of that this meeting happened. Somebody else needs to review this, or maybe you need to rein him in, because any meeting should occur here where we have an idea how many hours are being spent and things like that. And it caught the roadmaster is the same way. We don't understand why we can't require these turn lanes at the crest of a hill when other townships do. That's just one thing, but like you said, there were several things changed without anybody knowing about it. Why did they change? So maybe we should have you should review, suggest to you review more scrupulously, or we let our other engineer does a review, or the project gets turned over to him, Mike. I'll just leave that up to you.
Okay. We'll take charge of this, and Matt, I think you've raised a couple of issues certainly one of which I was not aware of, and we will look into it.
Thank you.
And just so you know, that the supervisors and Bob Adams and the subcommittee are meeting Thursday to discuss the path forward for this project.
Okay.
What are your options? Is one of them that this project not go forward until you have looked into this?
Well, Bill, we supervisors don't have the luxury of making that answer. We will receive a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and we will look at it with the knowledge that we might have gained during the process of the Planning Commission, and then we'll make a decision. But we will undoubtedly, as we have always done in the past, abide by the recommendation of the Planning Commission.
But Bill, just so you know, Bob Adams, his opinion is that this was handled properly. Well,
Certainly.
Yeah, we don't need to get paid here. We're going to look into it. Let's move on.
well, it's not even stated that, so.
Just one quick comment. I would like to urge the board to take a long view of the situations, irrespective of McFarland and the intersection, rather than an interim view. And I mean, maybe a 10, 15 year going out aspect
Thank you.
in regard to the need. Thank you.
You want to look at the resolution?
The next item is Ordinance 203. The Township last year had all the ordinances back at the beginning of ordinances codified into one ordinance book.
If you don't mind, please, okay, we want to conduct business here. Go ahead.
So all the ordinances were codified last year. They were finished at the end of the year. There's an ordinance book now that includes all the ordinances in the book. In order to make those ordinances effective properly, the supervisors need to adopt an ordinance that approves that everything was codified and it enacts that code book. So that's what Ordinance 203 is.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Does anybody have any questions on it?
No questions? Scudder, any questions?
Am I understanding correctly that this is strictly a procedural
Yes.
step so that the code book that we have is the official code book?
That is correct.
So if we ever add more ordinances or codify again, we have to do the same thing again.
So that when the section, when the ordinance makes reference to substituting in chapters 1 through 240, that's taking what already exists at the state level and including it into our official book.
Right.
Thank you.
The motion's on the table. All those in favor? Aye.
The next resolution is for the Kennett Bikeway, and I believe Tom Nail's going to speak on this resolution.
Well, we're still progressing on the bikeway. Hopefully we'll get into construction next year. In January, John Hedrick and I looked at what was required, and one thing that's required is a construction oversight and inspection service. We ran a pretty detailed cost estimate on it, and we came up with $80,000. Now, the break point on small projects and big projects in PennDOT was $100,000. So we thought we were well under it and could get along with a small project. Well, after PennDOT looked at what we had done, they added more things to it. We ran another cost estimate, and we feel it'll be around $96,000. The problem is, if we go under the small projects and it hits 100,000, we have big problems. Then you have to rebid, you have to stop work, and it's a lot of problems. So the ordinance that they passed in March was one that we thought was best. We've replaced it with this ordinance, that will allow us to go with a large project under PennDOT rules. Now, there's nothing, it's more work. In other words, before we could get by with just 3 bidders, where now we have to go out in the newspaper and advertise, so we'll get a bunch of them. There were just some minor changes and additions to the basic ordinance to make it fit with the large projects. The biggest one I saw was where we originally had a committee of 5 people for the selection process, and they cut it down to 4. So we took Lisa off of it. We figured she had plenty to do. But I think the 4 of us can handle it. There's nothing under the rules and regulations that I think John Hadrick and I will have any problem with complying with as far as large projects is concerned, since we've been doing it with the Brandywine Valley Scenic Byway Commission. So does anyone have any questions on it? This is more of a paperwork formality to keep PennDOT happy. Yes, Scudder.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I was looking at the proposed resolution, and I was a little bit confused with it. And you don't have it in front of you, but maybe you remember it. I'm concerned about the language, now therefore be it further resolved. Well, there's only one resolution, so I would propose we take further out.
All right, well...
and there's one other thing, can I call your attention first? That the Board of Supervisors, the 16th day of July 2012, on behalf of the Township of Kennett, hereby accept the attached policies and procedures. My concern is, which is presumably attached, but not in my copy. As I read through the preambles, however, it made reference to the PennDOT Standard Form Publication 93 and Appendix 7A. So, am I correct in understanding that the language, policies, and procedures in the actual resolution, the action part of it, is referencing Publication 93 and Appendix 7A?
Yes. I believe it is, but I'll have to double check that.
That's right.
Yeah.
I thought that, yeah, all that was in the original email that John Hadrick sent all the supervisors,
That
correct?
you got last week.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
So are we taking out further?
I'm sorry?
Are we taking out further?
I think it's cleaner, but if
You're the lawyer, if
Well, I
it's
can
cleaner.
just, we
we
can
only
take it
have
out.
one, we don't have a further.
Right.
It's being resolved.
Well, actually, it's -6 replacing the -10. Right?
Yes, but
That's not part of the actual language of the resolution, that's in the preambles.
because this resolution will replace that. We'll just take it out.
But I'll move for its adoption.
Second. Third.
Any other comments? Hearing none, I move the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go. Wait, I have one more thing under new business. We have Calvin Chen here, and I know you wanted to speak to the supervisors for a few minutes.
Yeah, let me do that in public comment.
Okay. Never mind, you have to wait.
That'll be in public comment.
Make it just a couple of minutes.
You done? Okay. The road report of current activities, this covers time from June 18 to present. Road crew installed drain pipes on Hillendale Road and an inlet box and a new cross pipe on Norway Road. Those excavations were topped, and after settling, they were blacktopped. Both of these roads, however, will be paved completely, not completely, but in part this summer. Trees down this month, 2 trees, one on Woodchuck Way and another one, I'm sorry, there were 2 on Woodchuck Way. Both fell in good weather with no storm. This is kind of interesting. The ground was very dry and the trees had no root system. The trees on Norway Road were trimmed for sight distance. One tree on Marshall Bridge Road was hanging down in traffic. Holiday Farm Subdivision was trimmed. Our second round of mowing was done along with trimming This effort takes about 2 weeks. The pole replacement at Devon Drive and West Hillendale Road that was postponed from last month was finally completed by Verizon.
That was Raven Drive.
What did I say, Robin?
No, you said,
Devon, I'm
you
sorry.
said Falcon Flare.
Yes, Raven. The last of the lines were transferred to this new pole, and the old pole was removed. The Township road crew will finish sloping the bank this or next week, and that will complete the project. Ashford Subdivision Sewer Project was finished after the Township and contractor worked together to expedite the repairs. Upcoming work in the Township for next month: a new railroad crossing on Norway will be installed. Also, PICO will be installing an extension of a gas main on Rosedale, which will run from Woodview Drive to Norway Road. The road will stay open for traffic, but will have traffic control. The Township Road program for chipping is set to start on July 30. The roads that will be chipped are the Hamilton Cutoff, McCarthy Road, Mill Road, and Cedar Croft Road. Roads to be paved beginning on October 13th. I can't read my own abbreviation, sorry. Hillendale Road from Route 52 to Pensbury Township, Norway Road from Woodward Road to Burnt Mill, and lastly, East Hillendale Road from Byard to Rosedale. Line painting will take place sometime in the month of August. The recycle pile at the Township Maintenance Yard is set to be ground up in August. And this whole program is working very well. We do have some problems when yard waste is dropped at that site, and sometimes people mix it with trash. And anybody that uses the yard waste disposal area, please be alert to the fact that trash will go into the recycle bins, and the other tree trimmings and waste goes into the other piles. And lastly, an update on the Chandler Mill Bridge. As of late last week, contacting the engineer, they're in the final process of writing their final report concerning the rehabilitation of the bridge. I was not told whether what their recommendation is going to be, but the report will go to PennDOT, and it may take an infinite amount of time for PennDOT to just accept it or go back for revisions. But at this time, there are no contracts let for the design of a new bridge or the rehabilitation of the existing one. Okay, that's the end of the road report. Subdivisions.
We have 4 requests for extensions: Case property until October 2, Limestone Ridge until August 21, Kaiser until August 31, and the Novak until October 1st. I move we approve all 4 extensions.
I second that.
Question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, other business. Mr. Chang, you had, oh, I'm sorry. We're not quite there yet, are we? I'm not pushing it.
I have another business if you're looking for something.
Yes, I'm desperately looking for something.
Last month, we had a report from, and I apologize, I can't think of the name of the program, but it was to create a walkway.
Activate Kennett.
Activate Kennett, thank you. Which was to create a walkway from New Garden Township, the shopping center, all the way through to Kennett Township, to include stretches of Kennett Township next to New Garden and on the opposite side, but to include the borough. This was a place for people to be able to walk from the borough out to the shopping center and back. And at that time, I had said that I was on my way to the Regional Planning Commission meeting the next day or thereabouts, and I was going to raise that question at that meeting. Well, that meeting was canceled at the last minute. I've nevertheless contacted both New Garden Township and borough personnel, and we're going to meet during August to continue that process to see if it's something that can be properly planned and be usable from a regional point of view. And I'm only making this report so that you know that it didn't fall into a hole someplace. I'll be glad to answer any questions, although I'm not sure whether there are any interest there. Thank you.
Do we have any other business? I have none. Are you all done?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
We'll go to public comment. Mr. Chang, you're first on the list, please.
Okay. Did it come up or just stand right here?
It's fine if everybody can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Calvin Chang. I'm a recent graduate from UC Berkeley, California. And the company I'm working with, Southwestern, recently contacted the attorney at the Kennett Township office regarding allowing solicitation within the ordinance and or within the township. And I believe you guys passed an ordinance, was it a year ago or? Quite a while ago. And just with the attorney, he just determined that one part is, I can read the email, but one part is against the First Amendment, and also because the company is based in Nashville, Tennessee, and we ship our products directly to the customers, it's against the Interstate Commerce Commission. So, but that aside, I'm just here to ask for permission because what I'm doing is actually educational related, and I'm open to explain our business model and how it works and how it won't negatively affect the people that I meet. Would that be helpful to explain it? The business model?
I don't think so. If your basic question or your issue concerns the ordinance about no solicitation, if there's a problem that you've raised, possibly a constitutional question, that's something that we'll have to take up with our counsel. I don't know any other way to address it than that. So we'll take it up with our counsel, and I know we have a letter from you, and we will have to get back to you.
Okay. So would the counsel keep in touch with the attorney that's working with me for this case?
I'll have to find that out.
Okay.
Do we know how to reach you?
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's why.
Did you also get the letter from the president of the company? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
I have that. But Albert, did you want to say anything further, because I know you guys...
I'm just questioning, that ordinance was passed, and we researched it in Pennsylvania, and you can't blanket prohibit people from soliciting. You're allowed charity, you're allowed religious, and you're allowed political. I don't see where this falls in any of them. And when he says a lawyer reviewed it for constitutional questions, it was your lawyer that did that. But the court cases we looked at are not ruling in Pennsylvania. So I want our lawyer to go further with that and have more discussion. I didn't have a chance to do that today. So the approach you take as our lawyer talking to his lawyer is probably the approach to take.
All right. Okay.
Can you just take, hi, my name is Kathy Pichette. Can you just take 1 minute and say what is your business? And you're going to be knocking on people's doors? I'm just curious.
Only if permitted, I would. Of course, I want to follow the law. So the business is with Southwestern, they're a publishing company. They're actually the oldest direct selling company in the United States.
So you're going to come to my door and try to sell me something?
If it's permitted, and it's kind of 1855. And it's actually educational publishing. So like I said, they've been around since 1855, and they recruit directly college students on their campuses and involve parents during the recruiting process. And they actually have a week-long sales training program rated by Sales and Marketing Magazine as a $5,000 training program for the students. No one's allowed to work unless they've actually gone through that. And personally, I've gone through my 5th summer in the program, and a lot of people, of course, you know, it's a no, like it's actual, like, hey, thanks, but no thanks for showing up, especially because we deal with education and families. But thousands and thousands of families have actually really been receptive to these products, especially if it helps out their kids in their education.
As I understand from your letter that you also had religious material?
No.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Okay, can I ask one additional question? these people you hire for your company, background checks on every one of them?
The background checks go through when we apply for a permit, then we let whatever townships or boroughs, they go through the background checks and decide whether or not we are allowed to sell based on the background checks. Like I said, we actually go through an intensive selection process for the students. So we go through 3 days, we involve the parents through the selection process where we make sure people are actually, come from good background, haven't done anything. Personally, I would need the money. I'm asking for a request here. This is my 5th summer in the program. I've worked in Long Island, New York, and Portland, and Seattle, and I've had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else have a public comment? Yes.
Yes, earlier Lisa addressed the Kennett Township audit recommendations. And as she herself pointed out, the one that she couldn't address directly had to do with the general fund balance. And so I was wondering if the supervisors could comment on the process that they're planning to use to address this question, and if there's any relationship between that and earlier discussions about a financial oversight committee that I believe was proposed by Mr. Stevens.
We haven't had a chance to meet on that very subject about the oversight committee.
Well, wait, let me correct that.
All right.
There is a committee working on the policies and procedures for the financial oversight committee,
Yes.
and I believe they're meeting at the end of the month to finalize that, and then they're going to present that financial committee to the board. The board has not seen that yet.
Okay, and what would be the relationship between that and the resolution of this particular audit recommendation?
I don't know, because I don't think, I know
Depends on what their
they
policy
haven't
is.
seen their policy yet.
Yeah. I can't make any comment on something I haven't seen.
Right.
Okay, so then would it be correct to understand that based on the recommendations of that committee, then we'd be able to discuss its potential relationship to this issue, and that no other work is going on this issue in the meantime?
I don't know that.
Oh, wait, on the general fund issue?
Yes.
No, I expect the 3 of them to be working on this.
And that's exactly the
I've
question I'm
asked them a
asking.
couple months ago on this, so I'm waiting for them.
Right, and so I'm addressing the question to them, what is being done, what's the process that they're going through to resolve it? Because it's not a trivial issue.
It's separate from the financial.
Okay, fine. So so you've answered part of my question. There's no direct relationship. Okay.
Yeah.
So then the second question is, if there's no direct relationship, then it's not being addressed by the Financial Oversight Committee process. Then what process are you going through? Because it's not a trivial issue.
I don't know how to answer his question. I really don't. We have a process that we've used for this purpose for a long time. I can't tell you that it's written. If that's what you're looking for, we don't have one at the moment. At least I'm not aware of it.
No, but I think this is a whole new issue. This has never been brought before the supervisors before, that you need to do something to lower the general fund.
Yeah.
So I think the 3 of
I
you.
don't think that's even what you're talking about, lower the general
Yes,
fund.
he is.
Yes, I'm talking about the issue of the general fund balances and how to, for lack of a better word, dispose of them, or adjust them. And it's a major
Reallocate.
issue. Reallocate, thank you very much. And it's a major issue. It has a big impact on the township. Many people have commented on it earlier. There was a huge discussion about it at the audit recommendations, in which I participated. So it's been another month, and I'm wondering what progress you've made, or even what process you're planning to use to make progress on it.
I have no comment.
Do you guys need, I mean, the 3 of you need to sit down, but I don't know, do you guys really know what process you're going to take?
No, other than that which we have used to get where we are today.
Well, that's gotten us to the problem.
I don't think it's a problem.
All right, just remember something. You said it's a problem, we don't see it as a problem.
Right.
All right? Now, is there anybody else? Joe?
Yeah, Joe Duffy. You have $9.5 million of our tax money sitting. That's more than you need. I think that
Joe,
is the
stop.
problem.
I'm sorry, stop where you are for a moment. You're
Okay.
talking about $9.5 million,
Right.
as though it's loose somewhere, and whenever we want to use half of it or a good chunk of it, we can just go use it, and that isn't correct. There's a great deal of that is already allocated.
How
We
much?
cannot touch the library fund. We cannot touch the open space fund. These are dedicated monies. We have a surplus, and I haven't seen that actually run as a number. But we're working on that, and we'll
Well,
get back to you.
what's your best estimate, Mike?
I have no intention of
5
saying.
million, 6 million, 7 million?
Any other questions?
How are we working on it, Mike?
I'm gonna call this subject to a halt because there is one other subject that needs to be discussed here, and Albert has asked for some time. And Albert, the floor is yours. Albert, would you go ahead, please? You're asking me to give you an estimate. I told you that I can't do that.
No, we're asking you to tell us the process.
Excuse me, Mr. Supervisor. Maybe I can address this. Because I was going to address it in the end of what I need to tell you.
Yes, that's a better place to put it. That will
I'll tell you that
that'll solve a lot of issues right here. Thank you.
I'm a taxpayer, a resident, I'd like to step down the role of police officer for a minute. I've been here about 4.5 years, and listening to projects that have to be done down the road, you don't have surplus. I don't think you're thinking of those. And I'll tell you the first one. Sewer along Kennett Pike. You have 3 failing systems there. You're making temporary repairs. These residents are making temporary repairs. But at some point, the DEP and the EPA is going to say, Kennett Township, build a sewer plant. It's coming. You got to listen to me why it's coming. That's going to cost $5 million. I totally agree that the residents should pay for that system. But the residents aren't going to be able to come up with $5 million. You're not going to get those people together. That's what you use government for. $5 million sewer plant, you're well on the way to having the funds for that. That's thinking down the road. And I think this was done years ago. Okay, that $5 million, that's what, like I said, government's for. There was a thing, well, maybe the residents should borrow it. They're not going to be able to borrow that. And for you to borrow it, that plant that costs $5 million, probably a good estimate right now, it's going to cost $20 to $25 million. So it's smart planning on somebody's behalf. And like I said, I heard this around here. To try to put the funds in a bank account now. Let it gain interest to help you with that. In addition, if you look at Concord Township and what happened there, you're also going to put sewer mains in. $1 million to $1.5 million. Any house that sewer main goes past is going to have to tap in. Some of these people are not going to be able to tap in. So there's some kind of, hopefully this is the exact name, slow pay, tap fee arrangement. Whereas you get to pay it in your quarterly payment, but you can't pay when everybody else is going to pay. They have to submit background and income statements and all that stuff. There's probably $6 to $7 million total for just that sewer. And I know you don't want to be in the sewer business, and you're very grateful to Kennett Square gives you a number of units, but that side might also change. Government has to protect the public, not just those residents on 52. That water is being discharged into the groundwater, and that groundwater affects everybody in this room. That's why the DEP and the EPA get in those systems. And it's very forceful in what they can do, as we already know. Now, other than that, the DEP and the EPA, they won't let you move a creek. You've got to move the road. You've got 2 roads that are going to require, I forget what they call it, environmentally correct retaining wall. Let's talk about that right now. You're going to need 2 separate walls on Marshall Bridge Road. That's been discussed here. The creek is falling in, or the road is falling in. You can't dump anything in the creek to keep that from falling in. If it falls in, you've got to put the retaining wall up, and it's the township's responsibility. That's probably $1 million to $1.5 million. Let's go around to Chandler Mill in Bucktown. Right? The same thing is happening over there. You're gonna need $1 million there. So what you think is a lot of money, and I agree, but I'm standing there saying last week, perhaps this should be explained, and I don't know who should explain it, our engineer or whatever, but these are projects that are going to have to be done. And we can get a big bill real soon. The other thing I looked at, just a curiosity, there are other municipalities that have that money. Mr. Umbright is very respectful, I respect him tremendously. He said he didn't know of any, but they are out there, you can check.
The county commissioners had a thing, and Penn Township was an example they used, the
Well,
millions that they had.
That's one of them, but there are others.
Yeah.
There are others.
Oh, yeah.
So this seems unusual, rebates and all that kind of stuff, and I don't advise you to do that as a resident taxpayer. I think, looking at where that came from, there was a financial planner a few years ago. He was pretty good. He invested, then when he saw, I guess he saw the bus coming, because he changed it to a more stable fund at a lower rate. He did a stake. So that really should put some light on why you need that kind of money. And to me, it's not enough, because there are other projects that you need to do. I'm just backing the ones off that I remember.
You haven't even mentioned Ways Lane.
No, I haven't. We're gonna get stuck on that one too. The storm sewer is gonna come. We're gonna get told to clean that environmental issue up. All the way through to McFarland Road, it's already being looked at also. And I'm sure there are more. There are probably more. So it's not as much money as you think it is.
Albert, I certainly appreciate you calling to our attention these issues, but frankly, that's the first I've heard such a catalog, and I sincerely mean it, thank you. I think what I'm hearing from those who are gathered is the question, what is the process for addressing that money? You bring up a clarification of how that money may be called upon in the future, but it doesn't put a time schedule on it, it doesn't officially catalog it, it doesn't name where the money is and what its investment in the meantime is, and a whole lot of other things, which I believe is part of what Tim Umbright's concern was. And if I hear the question being asked, I'm hearing the citizens ask the question, what is the process? And so I'm committing to, I've already raised the question of the Financial Oversight Committee to look at one aspect of this. I'm committing to, in the next month, be available whenever possible to sit with you, because you got the list
I have a
that
list.
you've already,
I have a longer
and the
list.
other people that are part of the administration, and begin to address that. But I think we need to do it. And I'm supporting the question.
I agree with you, but it seems to me there's two different questions. Where it will be used, and how will it be invested in the meantime?
Right.
We have an investment committee.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know, I'm not telling you to get involved in that.
Albert, you have, I think, other things that you want to mention, and the time is getting late here.
No,
you're
Want to get rid of a couple of these, and let me go, 'cause I'm going to need a few minutes.
I know you will. All right, can we do these two? Joe, you have.
Yeah, I want to thank the chief too for pointing out those things, and I think there's a device called sinking funds, which are set up to depreciating assets, to have the money set aside and growing to cover those future liabilities. That's one thing. The second thing, as far as the sewer, I had to put in my own sewer system on site, and I paid thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. Frankly, I and many others are not interested in funding other users of a sewer system that they get to use. I think the users should pay for that.
They
Pretty
do,
basic.
but they can't do it up front usually. They can't send somebody a $5 million bill.
Yes, I understand that.
And that's why.
But they should be charged whatever interest. If you're going to loan them the money,
That's what we're
let's do
doing
some
now.
training and let's
That's what we're
see.
doing with the other plants we're
That's
doing.
what we're doing in
Right,
Ashford.
explain that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashford is a case in point, it's exactly what you're saying.
Well, it's sort of changed, and what we heard was entirely different, but we haven't seen the details. I would like to see the details. But in essence, you're loaning Ashford residents money,
That's correct.
and from that, we're collecting interest.
And the principal, correct.
And principal, yes. Right.
Okay.
Nancy Aronofsky, Kennett Township.
Okay.
Thank you.
regards to process, several of us were interested in understanding what process is being used to consider these, quote, excess funds. It seems to me that a more responsible response from the supervisors than to say, we're going to do what we usually do, would be to say, we have some people with solid input in the room, there probably are more, we should be polling them and listening to them. And so, as a citizen, I object that there was clearly no process when there are knowledge of people with important input to that process. And Scudder, I thank you for putting this on path so that you, supervisors, if not we, will hear from the people who have knowledge so that we can hear as citizens what the options are.
Okay, thank you. And the last one back here, please, and then, Albert. Go ahead, please.
Shirley Weiner, Victoria Gardens. Since March, I have been talking about an issue with McFarland and Rosedale Road. Namely,
There's a stop sign now, there's no need to
I'm not
cut down
talking
bushes.
about the stop sign. Thank you very much. Some people don't watch the stop sign.
You know that.
However, my issue is with the person on the left-hand side with the fence. They used to have bushes. They have turned into trees. You cannot see to the left unless you go practically in the middle of the road. Now, you said that that person was a friend and you would talk to them.
And Albert, I believe that you or Roger talked to him?
Okay, the trees have been cut since you brought the last issue.
No, they just flourished.
Okay, there's a thing called sight distance in the vehicle code. You have to meet the sight distance. You only get a certain amount of distance in intersections. And they're outside the sight distance. We can't force them to cut them, which is why we recommended the four-way stop.
Well, then I think that you need, instead of four-way stop, I think that you need lights.
Well,
because,
again, we don't meet the requirement to put a traffic light there. When the development goes in, then we will probably meet the requirement. We have to get a permit from PennDOT. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'm trying to make you understand we've done what we can do. I sat there this morning because for probably quite a while to write tickets, and initially there were people going through the stop sign, and we were not permitted to do anything, but it's much better now, and we've not had an accident there since the four-way stop went in.
well, the thing is that there has been a horrendous accident, and I am afraid when I come up to that four-way stop that I have to keep inching out to, even to make a right-hand turn, to practically the middle of the road so I can look to the left. That's an accident waiting to happen, and I don't want it to be me.
Can I make a suggestion, Chief? Is there a way that we could have the safety committee address this and bring a presentation to the people on it? Bring a presentation to the people here?
We did. We addressed this multiple times.
But if we had a presentation?
That's why we have the four-way stop, that should result in...
No, I understand the four-way stop, and I understand
Well,
the
they
issue
recommended that.
about the bushes that you're talking about.
They're not bushes
And I understand
anymore.
about creeping into the intersection. And I understand about watching a tractor-trailer run that stop sign yesterday.
That's going to happen.
But, I just, I know that they're 33 feet, the right-of-way. And so the right-of-way is about 16 feet from the center line. And, pretty much the telephone poles are right on the edge most across the board. I just, I think we're having a citizen here with this concern. We should maybe try to look at it further.
It's not my concern alone.
I agree with you. I stop at the white line, and then I creep in, and then I creep in, and I watch the tractor trailer pass by.
We've done what
Well, we were hoping to have you the last one, but go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Diana Rear, I'm a Kennett Township resident, and I don't know if this would work, but at the company where I work, there is a very poor angle and a very tiny road going around the building, and it's very dangerous, obviously, for two-way traffic. Only one line of traffic can go at a time. And the way that they have resolved this is to angle a mirror on the corner so that one can see if there is traffic coming in the direction that you are going toward. And I'm wondering if, with all of these problems that have developed, and because of the obstruction caused by shrubs which are going to grow, and the difficulty, of course, of going into the intersection before you can proceed in a safe way, and you're already in danger when you're doing that, if it couldn't be an option to have such a mirror. It's a kind of a distortion mirror. It's not a real mirror. It's a mirror that you might, I guess, find in a carnival, concave mirror, where you would see the traffic that is coming.
We have some of those installed already in the township.
Well, it might work in that particular intersection.
I think that's what we're thinking about. Thank you.
Let me see if I understand the issue that you're raising. The corner has its risks, has for some period of time. The township has recognized that and has put in a four-way stop. Now, if everything were equal, you wouldn't have to inch out. You'd see a bumper right there, catty corner to where you are. And you wouldn't have to worry about it. You know you could go forward. The issue you are raising, if I understand you correctly, is some tractor trailer or somebody else in a less large vehicle doesn't stop, and so it comes over the crest and keeps on going.
Speeding.
In the meantime, you're halfway into the intersection and no place to go.
Right.
So the concern is to get people to stop at the stop sign, because you're going to have a problem seeing that happening until you're there at the instant, even if everything were cut back to the gentleman's porch. So the sight distance is not the issue. It's the concern that there may be a vehicle coming over the crest and catch you. Now, I don't know how you solve that problem, because you can be as absolutely safe and careful and responsible as you can be and come up to that intersection and still be caught. Now, and I don't know that anybody can do anything about that except to catch people that are running through stop signs. And I think strong enforcement is probably the way to do that until people finally learn that it's not a throughway anymore. There's a stop sign there.
No, it's right. One last.
I was just going to suggest, the problem is coming over the crest of that hill. People love to drive fast over those hills. And I think maybe, and then they come across the stop sign all of a sudden, maybe a blinking light with slow or something written on it right before that stop sign would warn people.
There's an overhead blinking light.
No, I mean before, the crest of the hill, like before you come
Yeah,
through.
like, and that was the issue why we needed it.
Right.
Because everybody, they come over the crest of the hill and there's the intersection.
Yeah.
The first thing we went for was the blinking light. I'll look at all these suggestions, but I think we've done what we think we can do.
Albert, you're still on. Okay.
Question?
It was just about that. During the time of the presentation and everything that we legally had to do, were they ever, you know those rumble slowdown strips? You can't do it? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I want to address the supervisors. I'm going to ask not to be interrupted. I got into a couple situations in the past month, and I think because of what I'm hearing on one, and because you need to be informed of the action on the other, I need to tell you this. I apologize. I should have got all of you together collectively. With everything going on this month, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. And one is, there's been a rumor around the township that there's $2 million in funds missing from the township. And I took it as a rumor, and everybody adds to it. But I saw in the past couple of weeks, last month, and even in this room at the meeting, somebody gets really upset and must be convinced that that money is missing. So if they're that convinced that that money is missing, I'm a little surprised that the first thing you would do when somebody took something they shouldn't have taken is you call it. And nobody contacted me. I'm a township employee. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable with. But I think I've demonstrated over the years I've been a police officer that you need to be arrested, I don't care who you are, I'll arrest you. And I thought, well, okay, they're not comfortable with me, even though I'd probably send that to the state police as somebody would see a possible conflict. Contact the state police, because that would be the next step if somebody wasn't comfortable. State police have had no complaints about Kennett Township at all. And then I contacted the district attorney's office, and I spoke to the chief of staff. He said the same thing, and he did hold, because I also heard from somebody that they didn't go to the district attorney's office because they went to the district attorney before, nothing was ever done, and they can't find a complaint that anybody had about Kennett Township for years. So I'm thinking to myself, you can't make an accusation like that. You shouldn't, because it's probably a libel. Don't check all that civil law. And some of this was put around in writing. It's a pretty big accusation to make. So I thought, well, before I open my mouth, I better make sure $2 million isn't missing. So I went to the township manager, and I took the time that she probably didn't have. I said, okay, what would somebody look at to see if there's $2 million missing? And I don't know, do you have this with you?
You're talking about the open space fund.
Well, I'm talking about everything, because what I did was I went to her office and I said, I want to see where the receipts come from. And she taxed them. I looked at them and I saw where all they were received. I saw where they were, the statements where they were put in the bank accounts. I saw the expenditures, and I also saw something else. Told me, yeah, somebody could probably not understand all that, and think that there's money missing. And that was 2008. Do you have this? I can show you this.
I have my copy.
Okay, all right, well, I'll explain. I looked at 2008, and I said, wow, 2008 was a busy year.
You know, he said he did not want to be interrupted.
What happened in
Oh, he did?
That's correct.
Yes.
What happened in 2008 was we purchased the easements for the Arnold property, the Halstead property, and the Whittle property. I own that property on today on Halstead and Barbie. And you should have preserved that. They're absolutely beautiful when you take the time to look at them. And I don't know how they benefit everybody, because I don't know how everybody gets up there to see them. I don't know that about easements. I didn't look at that close. But they absolutely should be preserved forever. And what we spent was $372,000 for the Arnold property, $1 million, actually spent $2 million for Halstead, is that right?
Right.
And $700,000 for Whittle. Okay, all very, to me, worth what you did. You know, open space is a good thing to do. So I looked at the Halstead property, it's $2 million. But I don't see any expenditures out of the Open Space Act account, which is required, you can find that out, being a separate fund. I don't see the $2 million expenditure, because expenditures don't come out of that account. I looked at the general operating procedures, and in early 2008, $2 million came out of that account, and I saw where it was for the Halstead property, saw all the transactions, everything. Now, I saw that and said, you can't pay out $2 million out of your general fund in the beginning of the year, because you have to have operating costs. So, at some point in early 2008, the Open Space Fund reimbursed $1 million. Later in 2008, the Open Space Fund reimbursed the general fund $700,000. There's still $300,000 that was never reimbursed to that account, and it may just be accounting, but that's certainly the supervisor's decision. Well, when you look at this, you look at, in the beginning of the year, there's supposed to be $4 million in that account, and at the end of the year, there's $1,783,658. So if you're just looking at that account, you say, where did $2 million go? And of course, you have to look at the expenditures. So as I said, unless you've got some kind of proof, this is an awful accusation to make. And I don't think people should continue to make it. But, I then went back to the issue of the 9 and 10 audit. And this puzzled me because I got a hypothetical question. And this is why I say they're two different things. I got a hypothetical question from some residents who said, we have a hypothetical question. Police officers get them all the time. And they said, if we submitted something to somebody and said it was authentic, true, accurate, reliable, and it's not, do we commit a crime? The close answer to that is yes. because there are laws in the crimes code about unsworn statements, deceptive business practices, there's all kinds of things in the crimes code to fix that. But the immediate response was, we didn't take the money. And that really puzzled me because we didn't take the money. And I kind of forgot about it for a little bit. And another thing puzzled me was they didn't want to meet me in the township building and they wanted to meet me somewhere private. To the point that when I continued to talk to them, I said, well, I know you, I don't know what you're into, but I think you need to talk to an attorney first. There's a change about constitutional rights and all that when you have to buy and everything, but still. This is something that bugged me because they said we. Somebody else could come in ahead of time and talk to me, and there could be a crime there. Because I went back to the 09 and the 10 audits. Now, if you're going to claim the $2 million mistake, and then you've got these audits that you can't find the auditor, it looks like they're phony audits. So it looks like somebody in this building, the supervisors, almost took $2 million. If you say, well, they were phony audits. And I'm a little puzzled by this audit thing because my records tell me that shortly after the 10 audit, you asked me, check that come up. Says, hey, can you locate who was at that mailbox 8129? And again, I should be more on top of this.
That profile box number was on his stationery.
Yes, it is. I didn't know that, all I had was the post office box number. But at some point, I saw the zip code. And the zip code was 19803. But yet, his address says Longwood, Delaware. And that question came up. What's really going on here? 19803 is obviously the zip code, and that's what the post office relies on. So whatever we sent, if it was mailed to 8192, 19803, it didn't go there. So I mailed a couple letters myself, and they didn't come back, so I figured, well, it must be a mistake on the number. It must be Wilmington, and the zip code is wrong. Except, everything he sent us is 8129, 19803. So I went to the post office and found out what happened. They didn't come back. The third one I sent did. How can this happen? And the answer was, is somebody puts a forwarding on that box. And it comes in, and the person who's sorting the mail knows the person it's forwarded to, it's human. It's faster just to throw it. Can happen, is what I was told. And then I started to get, after I bugged Lisa about all these figures on the money, I asked for the audits, and I went back to, is it not authentic? Hey, what's up? Now, in the meantime, we had the discussion about, why don't we just do these over again, and last month we decided to do them over again. We're going to have to do them over again anyway, because when I found all this out, I decided I need to look at these laws to see what's going on. You're going to have to get an accountant for me, and you won't pay. No matter who investigated, state police, county, federal, you pay the cost. And I took them to another accountant, and the accounting process for business, because we had a comment here about I ran a business for 30 years, and those audits are nothing like that. It's true. Absolutely. Because municipal accounting principles or practices in Pennsylvania are different than many business records. You have to comply with the CED standard. You have to submit the reports to them. Not the whole report. You have to fill out the forms. So, at one point I see this man, Ben Johnson, CPA, and another thing I see SGR Group, Certified Public Accountants. The thing that bothered me about all the correspondence on this is there's no physical address for his office. None. So how can we drop anything off if we wanted to? We can't. There's no physical address. Then the next thing that concerned me was there's no telephone number. So how do we contact him? And email. There's no email either. So looking back on this, I think whoever did this either knew you or somebody else knew you, and they knew you were too trustworthy. That's the first thing that happened. The second thing was, how do you get the job? And the answer to that is, you're conservative spenders. I know that better than anybody. Try to get certain things. And that's a good thing, that's probably why you have your supervisor. He came in, and he came in much lower than the next bid. And he gave you a 2-year package, and the next year was going to be lower. So, I don't want to go into all the investigative things, because I have an investigation going on this, because this is basically, in simple terms, fraud, you deceit. I'm surprised. I needed to know, how did this guy get in here? That surprises me even more. I'm sure there's some red flags go up, but you're not in my business. I saw from the beginning red flags, which you probably would have seen. And the first one was, I don't know if you knew how he arrived here. Because at some point I asked some questions, and it was supposed to be from some people in response to an ad. Well, there's no copy of an ad. So he didn't come here in response to an ad. He happened to show up when you had a work session. How does he know, he's from Delaware, when your work session is? He just arrived here at a work session. He made a presentation to you, and now that I thought about it, I seem to remember who he was. The next thing that surprised me, and that is, he gets here September 24th and 9th. He sends you a letter, and it's not a nice letterhead, it's not a decent letterhead, it's simply, the whole thing, I think, from what I've seen so far, is nothing but copy paper. He doesn't send you an original letter that I can find. He sends this letter, there's no office address, there's no place for us to go to find him, and the post office box doesn't exist. He makes a presentation to you in that work session. This is before Scudder, so it was radio. He's a very reasonable person. He seems very knowledgeable. He went down the list of everything he could to sell you this. Now, okay, that happens all the time. It's called fraud. You get the check, and you walk away happy. He didn't take the check. He took it, but he didn't cash it. Okay? That goes back to somebody asking me, but we didn't take the money. Because the only thing I could think of that happened here in the last couple of years that we didn't take the money is this. So I look further, and I say, and I asked about this, and it was inconceivable if this guy could do this 2 years in a row. Well, if he did it one, why not? And that's exactly what he did. He arrived here again. He knew that Lisa told him first meeting, and I don't believe you were in there for everything when he talked. You left, and then you came back, and he asked the question of you, when do I do this? When do I start? And you said, it takes me a month to get things together. Well, he says, okay, I'll be back February 2nd. Well, that's 4 months. That's October, November, December, and January. You mean nothing changed in his life in 4 months? Did he simply arrive back here on February 2nd? True. That's true. He didn't make a phone call and say, hey, are you ready? He did nothing. He just showed up here, he sat in the conference room, he played with papers, because the more I'm looking at this, the more I don't think he did it. I think took it to somebody and they did it. Because although it meets the standards, it is not very good. You look at it compared to Tim Unbright's, and you see it right away. But it met the standards. I mean, there was nothing wrong with that. I'm a little surprised that it didn't include liabilities for 9 and 10. And he comes back and he does the same thing over again, and now I remember what he looked like and everything. So I may be able to find him under a different method, but the problem is his name was Ed Johnson. So when you put that name into computers, which you can do for a driver's license, particularly in Pennsylvania, you only need a bit first, you get 5 pages of it. When you put it into systems across the country, you get even more than that. So it's a very common name. And it looks to me like all the signatures are exactly the same. I haven't sent that to a lab yet. I think this man, I need to work on this. Very difficult because you were deceived. And somebody, if we is correct on this, is out to do this to the township. What the reason is, I don't know, but I start to see some things where somebody is trying to deceive you also. And there's some other things they need to check. Why would somebody do this? Could be a lot of reasons. Could be ex-employee, you do have a few of them. It could be somebody didn't like a decision you made, and you were bound to make certain, most of the decisions you make you're bound by law to make. Although the practice in the past is better now because there's an opportunity for you to explain. In In the past, there'd be discussions in the work session, people would come to the work session, you see the public was informed, there were minutes put out on the website. When you came in here, there'd only be a couple people, and it would be past such and such, such and such, but there wouldn't be a lot of explanation. That's changed now, and that's a good thing that it has changed. So, somebody read all this very clearly, very carefully. And as I said, I need to continue looking for this. In this investigative matter, I need the separate advice of a lawyer. Somebody who's familiar with investigative procedures, somebody who knows civil law. A lot of this is civil law, and also can do the criminal law. I need separate advice. I had it in other places I went. I used it in other departments I did things for. I need to go forward, and I need to get counsel. Now, we have a very good general solicitor. The guy's been doing municipal laws for years. He's the general solicitor. And I need somebody who can aid me in this. There's going to be a cost. There's already been some cost. We need to get to the bottom of this.
Albert, you have our full support. If you need separate counsel, let us know.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move we approve the chief's request for investigative support.
I second that. Is there any other comments to Scudder?
No, other than the fact that I'm very pleased that the chief has been as diligent and as thorough as he's been in pursuing this. And if I heard him correctly, that he's beginning to remember the face that was involved. And I certainly have, for some considerable period of time, been concerned about the story that he has recounted. And so I'm glad that is going forward, just as I'm looking forward to the audit for 09 and 10.
It's done now. I don't have it, but I'm sitting with Umray at the end of the week to review it, and then the supervisors will review it. But on that, I would like to be able to ask him to do an audit of the open space fund and put this open.
There's a motion on the table. Motion on the table to, as Bob put it, which I seconded. Do we have any further questions? And if not, I call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Now, on to the open space fund.
Yes.
I would like to know if the supervisors would approve for Tim to do a separate audit of the open space fund.
And that is also my recommendation. And I haven't seen this for your own right.
He mentioned to me that when he comes in, he wants to go over it.
Well,
So I assume that would be an extra charge because that is not in his.
I think that's a very reasonable request.
I'm confused by that, though, because the audit should include all of the funds.
He meant going back to the beginning of the open space fund.
Oh, that's what you're asking
And
to
that's
do?
what I'm asking. I'm asking that, and he said he wants to review it.
I think that that's a perfectly appropriate thing to do at this point. There's been enough rough water down this stream with a lot of lack of answers because of, well, not lack of answers, but I'm sure incomplete picture of what has happened. So I think it makes a great deal of sense to focus on that very directly.
I'll second that.
Well, I don't think we need a motion.
Well,
If we do.
you might as well.
We're going to spend money,
Yeah.
so we should, if I should.
Yeah.
So that means Scudder made a motion?
Yeah.
Did you make the motion, Scudder?
I move that we, to be perfectly candid, the motion that I'd like to do is the chief has called attention to open space. I think there's an equally important question about sewer funds. I think it ought to be, those are the two that come to mind to me. I think that if he's going to dig into the funding, and he's already done 11, he's now done 10, he's done 9, the hard work is done. I mean, it's hard to figure out how you get that done. You're starting at the top and you're going to the bottom. Normally you go from the bottom and come up. You start at the beginning and go to the end rather than the end to the beginning.
We had a timetable to make that.
I'm sorry?
We had a timetable, we had easy.
I understand. I'm not being
I will
critical.
ask him
I'm not
about
being critical.
sewer and see what
Yeah, that's my motion, that we hire Umbright and Corrigal and Umbright, I forget which way it is, to do a complete audit of both the sewer fund and the open space fund.
That might have been that move closer, I'd like
Possible expenditures.
I'm comfortable with it, but I would like to prioritize it, that we do this open space first.
Why don't, just, this may be out of order, but I would think the auditor would know the most efficient way to
That's right.
approach the question. And perhaps in parallel is more efficient, and perhaps in sequence is more easier.
The motion is on, the floor was satisfied. Is there any further conversations?
Lisa, will the auditor have access?
I'm sorry, there is a motion on the floor, please. All those in favor?
Well, don't we get discussion, or is that no longer?
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have discussion on
Yes.
that? I beg your pardon, go ahead.
Jeff Yetter, Kennett Township. Lisa, are you going to make available to the auditor the discretionary funds that previous boards of supervisors put into open space out of the general fund?
Well, can you explain exactly what you mean by that?
In 2007, there was documentation given by Mr. Falkoff of the amount that was in there.
Yes.
And when 2008 turned the corner, it was a whole lot different from published records that you published.
Okay.
And I was told it was discretionary funds that previous supervisors, because they were very supportive of open space, had put in. But now, because we weren't working with the land trust, we decided to take them out so we could save it in every month.
And let me explain what happened. I've already talked with him about that. What happened in the past, when Bill was a supervisor, Chuck was a supervisor, the supervisors had fund balances that were fictitious funds. They were not actual funds. So what they said was, they had a, well, it's not, let me explain what they did first before everybody, I'm not a supervisor here. This is what all the other supervisors did, so let me explain it. The supervisors would take, say they had $5 million in the general fund. At the end of each year, they would say, okay, we're going to allocate $2 million to the sewer fund, $3 million to the open space fund, so on and so forth. And that's what they did. That's where they came up with the $4 million that was presented in the open space fund. That money was never put into a separate account for open space. It was never earmarked in any budgeting. It was a fund balance that all the supervisors created. I don't know if Chuck or Bill, if you remember that you guys used to do that. Do you remember the fund balances that?
No, I don't remember the fund balances. I remember the budgets that were very carefully gone over by line item as to what we had coming in and what we were going to spend and what we were going to spend it on.
Right, but the supervisors also had fund balances that they, at the end of each year, they would say, okay, we have a surplus and we have this ongoing fund balance for sewer, open space, street light, hydrant, and
ongoing thing.
yeah, and so each year the supervisors would say, we have a $300,000 surplus, we're going to put $100,000 in open space. So that's how that works.
Yeah, our budget at the time was around $1 million. We
Right.
did not have earned income tax, which
That's right.
contributed $2.8 million per year to us now. We got a lot more to worry about than we did then.
Right. And so at one point, when that sheet was being presented to the public, I went to the supervisors and asked them to stop presenting that to the public because it's not actual funds. It's very confusing to people. It makes people think that there is a $4.5 million open space fund, which there is not. But to answer your question, Tim Umbright will have access to that. He has already seen that, and we've already discussed it.
I would assume, Lisa, that when Tim does that review, he's going to have to do it not only the actual number, but he's going to also have to reconcile it to what you're talking about. And so I would assume, I presume, that his review would take that into consideration. Does that make sense?
It may.
You shake your head no.
Well, because they weren't physical accounts. What the supervisors did is divided up all the general fund money, like they should, like Michael Gutman has asked them to do now. Except that then they just did it on paper. now,
But it's published and it's an official paper, that's the reconciliation of that official paper to the actual, it seems to me, is what Ken has to do.
and if he wants to do it that way, that's fine with me.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you, Joe Duffy. I had a question about the previous motion to give full support to the chief hiring an attorney. What's the extent of that support? I mean, what do you mean? Is that $10,000?
Joe, at this moment in time, I could not even make a guess.
Well, is there a...
I doubt if it's going to be $100,000, but if you said it was $1,000, I would...
Right.
I don't know.
The chief isn't known for buying silver bullets, so I'll leave it at that.
Right, and I make no aspersions. I thank him for doing all his work. But you as supervisors, I mean, we're the taxpayers, kind of is our bracket on the extent of that support.
This is a new idea that he has given to us tonight. He probably couldn't even answer the question either. One of the things...
So then your meaning of support is you're behind the idea.
Go ahead, Chief.
Will there be another motion for the cost?
That's exactly my comment. I'm assuming that at some point the chief will come back and say, this is what I need to do, and I have looked at various attorneys, and this is what is the person that I'm recommending, and this is what the cost breakdown would be, a fee letter would reflect. Then we'd be able to make a much more specific decision. My understanding of what I voted on tonight was to authorize the chief to go forward to investigate and look to getting the help that he needs. But we haven't given him a checkbook saying, knock at it.
We have not given that checkbook.
Right.
No.
So that's a separate decision later.
It will be.
It takes, I need to move forward with this. I'd rather have you cap it, 5,000, 10,000, then I come back, because I need to get moving with this.
Well, it's not a budgeted item. We don't have this in our budget.
Well, I think you do in my police account, do I? I put some extra cost in there, never thinking I had to do this.
Put $10,000 cap on it or something.
Who hires this person? Is it the chief? Albert's going to hire him? So he's working for Albert?
No, he's working for the township.
He'll be working for the township.
So then we hire him. If he is working for us and we're paying him, we hire him, correct?
Technically, you're right. He's not going to have to present a resume to me with his qualifications, and I cannot judge it. Okay? Albert's going to be the one that's going to recommend Mr. John.
Thank you for the clarification.
I agree. When I listened to that motion, I was looking for that you would allow him to go investigate and propose those people he needs to do a full investigation and the cost of that. That was not included in that motion. I just want, this is kind of complimentary. But when I read the, for a change.
Don't feel embarrassed.
When I read the minutes of last month, and I looked at the agenda, there were some things to be followed up on here that were not on the agenda. But thank goodness Lisa took the challenge here and covered the status of a lot of things that were being looked at. And I think that's the right thing to do. She probably knows more intimately about what's going on here and the numbers and that kind of stuff than any of the three of you. And I would like to see Lisa take a more important part in the procedures here, particularly with that one issue. And that issue is that she will look at the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting, and she will be prepared to follow up on what's still hanging, what's been done, and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Bill. Yes.
Amy Warren, I live on McFarland Road. I'm a party to the Limestone Ridge property conditional land use, and I'd like to support Matt Sabo and the points he made. And I think it's very important that you address those issues, and especially since the money that I assume will be subsidizing the housing is coming from a public fund, so it needs to
done ethically and above board.
I quite agree with you. Thank you for your comment. Yes.
John Dewey, I live on McFarland Road, I just want to mirror again what you just said.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
All right. And any other comments?
We have bills to pay.
We have bills to pay, and I would like to make a motion that we adjourn.
May I?
Wait,
Very, very quickly, because I think it's important that we keep a full picture of this. I think it began last month. In the past, we've had bills to pay in just one package. And the package this year, this month, and I think last month, is for bills coming out of the open space tax fund, bills being paid out of the escrow fund, bills being paid out of the sewer fund, and the general operating fund. So there are 4 different sets of bills that are being paid, and I'm assuming that the motion to pay included all 4 of them. So I just wanted us to all be clear that there is a shift in policy over the last 2 months or so, and I think that that follows up on the audit that was recommended.
Yeah.
So it was moved and seconded, and now certainly
Okay, all in favor?
All in favor? Well, we've adjourned, but go ahead, please. Go on.
I just wanted to make a comment, because of what Chief McCarthy brought up and the immediacy that he feels and that is really there to continue this investigation. It doesn't involve money yet. It has to be approved by the board. And I don't know what the time is right now because I don't have my watch on, but I just feel that it would be very expedient for township business to get things moving along and to be able to, take hold of something like this that comes up at a meeting and then be able to move with it. To have those workshops, the public workshops.
We have been told not to take action at workshops, so they become useless almost, as far as I'm
They're
concerned.
public workshops, and of course you meet, I'm sure together, in between to discuss business. I think that's how things keep moving along, and it's a very positive thing. So I really hope that you'll consider that.
Well, it's on our agenda to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have adjourned. You may not know it.
Okay.